Another program, 1,000 hours, deep logos. Give me grace. Allow me to be in service. Allow my voice to resonate. Allow me to be one of those that changes this world. Give me that Greek logos. Give me that depth. Give me the stillness. And give me that energy. +4, +3, +2, +1. Stillness. And hold. Brian, be with me today. Be there. And be with us all. Hello, Brian. David here. Are you there? Brian? Have you turned your microphone on, Brian? Hello? Brian? Brian, am I interrupting your beautiful melodies as usual?
Hello, David. Greetings from the Ecuadorian Andes.
Hello, Brian. How's the weather in that neck of the woods today?
It's very nice. The weather here is almost always perfect. We're about a mile high in the Andes, and right now we have some clouds. We might get a little rain later, maybe a thunderstorm. It's lovely here. It's green. It's lush, and we just love the environment here.
I'm with you, Brian. It sounds and feels beautiful indeed. Here we are at the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference, Brian, in Holland. Thank you for joining us all today.
Well, thank you, David. The pleasure is mine.
And ours, Brian, more than you can possibly know. Would you paint a tapestry of life in earlier years? We'd love to hear of your journeys toward the pursuit of space travel.
Yes, well, David, it was in many ways, I think, now looking at the world the way it is now, almost an ideal childhood. I sometimes think of the image of Pleasantville, grew up in the Boston suburb of Belmont, sort of in the shadow of Harvard University, with lots of intellectual life, as well as a general sense of optimism. When I was a Boy Scout, I was a very enthusiastic Boy Scout. I became an Eagle Scout. I grew up during World War II and the aftermath, which in where I was, it was pretty protected and also very optimistic about the future of humanity. And so since a very early age, I took an interest in space exploration, even though it wasn't in NASA's, well, there was no NASA then, there was no Sputnik yet. And a lot of people thought I was crazy to pursue my interest in space exploration, but I would voraciously read books like some of Wernher von Braun's and Arthur C. Clarke's books back in the late 40s, early 50s as I was growing up. And so I had a great deal of optimism, even though this may not have been acknowledged or understood that much by my elders, but my parents encouraged me to move forward with all of this, and so I became an Eagle Scout at good grades and seemed headed for the best. And brightest of careers, which turned out to be about space. And that happened rather quickly as soon as John F. Kennedy set the lunar landing goal in 1961. That's when I graduated from college, also in Massachusetts, Williams College. And so they were I'd say, basically good years, and I was kind of assuming the whole world was that way. I was pretty naive about some of the problem areas that we were having. Even then, at least it propelled me forward into, let's say, a lifetime of a lot of alternative thinking, going against the grain of the mainstream.
Although rather oblivious at the time, perhaps since, have you realized the shift affected to this world as a result of atomic power, the events of 1945, and the long-term implications for our planet, perhaps?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, David. Yes, 1945, of course, as a kid, I was totally oblivious to the horrendous damage that the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs created, and how unnecessary they were. It was later in my life that I became a peace activist, that I became very much more aware of these things. So obviously, and in my family, my parents and everybody around me celebrated the fact that we won victory over Japan and victory in Europe as well. And that seemed to me to be really good news, and all the more reason why we could propel forward into a more of an expansive visionary point of view.
While balancing between a nuclear world, higher purpose, vision, and nature, you clearly had your sights on space travel in teenage years, despite these questionable technological developments, Brian.
But also as a child, especially as a young child, I felt a sense of awe toward nature. That I used to spend the summers mostly in New Hampshire at a summer camp, and did a lot of hiking and mountain climbing and close contact with nature, which now I look back upon as being a very precious time for me, much more precious than maybe I would have acknowledged during most of my productive years.
And now in this moment, Brian, having framed your earlier years, and for those here today, what is it that defines our times, this transformational renaissance period that we're traveling through in this human nature that's rebirthing itself and in concert with the reshaping of science and spirituality?
This whole transformation that we need to go through, and very soon, by the way, violates a lot of historical tradition. This really is unprecedented. And to my way of thinking, and I've spent many years in science, and I've also spent many years in metaphysical exploration, so I've kind of seen it from both angles. And now I'm beginning to realize, and trying to make this synthesis at this point in my life, that we can have it both ways, that science itself, the methodology of science, the kind of inquiries we can make are truly remarkable. That if, in principle, if we were left to our own devices, and new scientists that are willing to step outside the box of traditional Western materialistic thinking, could truly make a big difference. And what we need here is basically a set of scenarios for a whole new design for humanity and for nature. And that design can be begun now as a conscious effort, not as anything that has to be this way or else. No, of course not. But that we can look at our energy systems, for example, and truly come up with energy devices that will totally transform the world in a very short order. Once we lift the veil of fossil fuels and nuclear power, which is now showing itself in all respects to not be the answer. And that, of course, is 93% of the energy we use, in which there are investments of trillions of dollars. So that means that the money system also will need changing. And these are all daunting tasks to perform, but at the same time, we have the ability to do it. And we can come together and create these visions for the future with the help of spirit, of course. And that's a part, it's really a combination of spiritual approaches and scientific approaches to this. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes is from Buckminster Fuller, who's one of my true heroes, is he said basically there's only one kind of revolution that really works, and that's a revolution by design. Well, I think we can be co-creators with God, or with whatever you want to call this spiritual unity that we all feel, and that's getting stronger and stronger all the time, that we're co-creators of this vision, and that we can truly do the job without having to dwell too much on the dramas that are unfolding all around us.
We are here today, Brian, at this amazing time in the knowledge that a convergence and spiritual awakening is now ready to dawn breakthrough energy. These secret and divine technologies that Tesla and others created can now be put into action, and we are ready, are we not?
Well, yeah. First of all, the free energy technologies, actually, they've been around for about 100 years, actually more than that. And they've been violently suppressed throughout the process. And so it's led to a very gloomy outlook by many of us that have been in the field for several decades, that this airtight suppression will continue indefinitely. And certainly many of us have tried many ways of getting around the suppression, and that simply hasn't worked yet. It's amazing to think that a technology exists in principle, well, also in the form of research devices that prove the concepts, and yet they haven't been implemented yet. Now, the good news about all of this is not only the spiritual awakening and the awakening of the awareness, the encouragement that whistleblowers will come forward and reveal the fallacies of what's going on now, which are to such extreme, that can light up some people. That's the first step in the lighting up. The second being, well, what is it that we can truly do as co-creators with this spiritual sense that's beginning to really take hold. So I think there is a convergence. I'm optimistic. There are a few free energy devices. There's a cold fusion device called the Rossi reactor that's being developed at the University of Bologna in Italy. It's that kind of thing that I think in the long run is unstoppable. And so then that opens up, in a sense, a Pandora's box, a positive Pandora's box, to all sorts of other possibilities. Because once we get the energy questions solved and people are aware that that is possible, then people are going to be very inspired, and it will just really spread very fast. Sort of like the early days of aviation. And the skeptics, well, they just will be put back in their place, and we can move ahead with it. But it also forces the issue of responsible governance, responsible management of the technology so it doesn't get abused like nuclear power. Because we're talking about some principles which are also very akin to the principles of spirit and consciousness. Namely, that there is an enormous potential energy field throughout all of time and space, which can be tapped either by ourselves as humans, or by a device that can produce energy. And these principles are very, very well understood by some of us who've actually seen them in operation and have had the experience also of doing these things. And so we can have it all ways. And that message does need to get out to more and more people, that not only do we need to seek the truth and have it revealed for what it is, but also to embrace if you will, pull ourselves into the new vision, which the human part of it anyway, and some of the downloads from spirit that many talented inventors have come up with are really quite extraordinary and can really produce the kind of future. It's actually happening. And that's the exciting thing about it. Unfortunately, these unsung heroes are also so violently suppressed that they've been divided and ruled, and the present culture has just basically made martyrs of them. But that, of course, has happened throughout history, too. So this awakening of consciousness becomes all the more important to be able to support these people and to come together in an egoless way so that we can kind of leave our own agendas at the door and come together and create new technologies that work with nature instead of against nature, and to create new governance systems.
We're acknowledging today your contribution, Brian. Know that. In this moment, where do we travel for the success of our community and our critical sense of individual and co-creative potential for the creation of real universal energy?
Well, thank you. And yeah, I do feel this urgency. And actually, this is, I think, all part of the convergence process that's going on. Is the last, I'd say 10 to 20 years of my life, I've gotten out of my metaphysical exploration phase and back to science. But back to a science the way it ought to be practiced and not the way it's being practiced, where there's fearless inquiry into the phenomena of nature and to steadfastly focus on the goal of having a sustainable, just, and peaceful future for humanity, that it's absolutely necessary. And that people are going to need to now awaken and become aware of what the possibilities are. And the spirit with which it's approached, it's also very important to come from a position of service. I, last August, had a heart attack that almost killed me, and I made an agreement with whoever you would say, my higher self, that I wanted to live. I wanted to stay here, and I wanted to be of service. I wanted to do this work as a volunteer and not expect anything in return besides just doing the work. And this is the kind of thing that I think has caused me to break out of some molds and to develop personally and even more into that direction, and to hope that others would join with a similar kind of spirit. So that, for example, I know that many of us who have been divided and ruled, many people in the environmental movement, many scientists who might want to break away from the mainstream, and many political progressives, and I'm all three, have still fallen short. And they've kind of gotten into their own boxes, their own vested interests. And so I address a lot of what I'm sharing here to those people to break out, to think beyond solar and wind, for example. That's not going to do it. It's I wish it would, but it's not sufficient. It uses too much materials, too much land. There'd be a lot of mining going on. The same goes for, of course, geoengineering projects. And all of those things are kind of gross, large-scale, so-called solutions, which are really all part of the old paradigm. And so the part of the awakening process is to be able to identify what is in the old category and what needs to be in the new category. Because the new category does exist. We can have clean energy and abundant energy. We can have clean water. We can have nutritious food. We can revise our monetary systems. We can do this across the board. But of course, the real challenge here, and I know, David, you've been working on this for a while, is for people to come together and let go of their egos as much as possible, so that we can at least combine in our intention. And we know now scientifically as well as experientially that two or more are gathered with a higher purpose. That intention literally creates miracles in the material world. so that when a certain critical mass gets together, whether it's a 100th monkey or whatever you want to call it, in intention, without any kind of expression of, well, I think this is the way we ought to do it and blah, 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 blah. No, where we let go of that and we focus on the goals, and we know in our hearts that solutions are possible and that we can be co-creators in this, and we can do what's necessary to get from here to there.
So in your world, how does government renew or reorganize towards recognition of a personal and corporate environmental renaissance?
Well, obviously, the new governance needs to be completely new. It's really hard to breed it from past governances. And in a sense, it's a daunting task. It takes great courage to try to embrace these things without appear to sound that as if you're power hungry. Because, as we all know, governance in general and technology in general have been given a bad rap, mainly because almost all governments and almost all technologies are corrupt and dirty. And so we really are starting from scratch. And it's a task that's even more daunting than the founding fathers of the U.S. And in this case, it's definitely got to be more humble, more egalitarian, and yet at the same time, it still needs to be focused on what's possible, because a lot of people, when they gather, don't really understand that. In a sense, the green movement has been kind of stuck in a process that's a blend of democracy, but also a blend of narcissism, where it's really hard in our discourse to get beyond a certain point. It's sort of like a closed loop conversation. So there are many, many obstacles we need to be aware of. And, in my experience, since we've moved here to Ecuador, and Meredith, my artist wife, and I created Montasueños, our retreat center here, we've gone through many, many different, I should say, different incarnations in forming this place and hosting people. And what I discovered was, to the degree that I tried to control things and use my ego, which I still do quite a bit of when I get bogged down with details, is the degree to which we don't make progress. But if I'm open to synchronicities, and they're happening all the time here, that this is a miraculous place, without any kind of expectations, then things roll along pretty well. But at the same time, I also need to be very aware of what's possible. And yes, the environmental situation on this planet is far worse than most of us can even imagine. And from some points of view, it may already be too late. There may have to be a transformation of the planet through combined intention that is truly miraculous, where the material world, whether it's our bodies or whether the earth as a whole, is literally transformed by the combined positive intention of many of us that are in this game.
Again, with all that said, Brian, the planet today demands that we dive into these new methods of energetic principles, and that infinite energy available to us through this divine intention that you speak of. We face realities today as we face the realities of tomorrow in terms of common sense survival.
Well, yes, David. The way I'm thinking these days is that the best way that we can survive in the long term is to almost ruthlessly demand and to begin to implement radical systemic solutions. And so if you divide it into sectors like the energy sector, and you look at the energy options that we have, the one that stands out by far the most is so-called free energy. I'd like to almost call it Tesla energy, in memory of the great Nikola Tesla, who over a century ago came up with many of these concepts that are now being replicated by many, many, many others, and with many devices that apparently are very close to commercial implementation. And these concepts, which I've described, are nothing less than miraculous by today's mainstream scientific standards. It's basically taking energy from the vacuum of space. It's the same kind of technology that is used in our being able to tap our higher consciousness and to be able to create results in the material world, whether it's matter, energy, whatever it is. So that is one very, very big solution, is the so-called free energy. This is the energy from the vacuum, energy from cold fusion sources, energy from special hydrogen and water configurations. This is energy that's basically free. And of course, this is going to unseat the vested powers, unlike probably any single development in human history. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so suppressed. And so the situation I see now is very dramatic. And by the way, it's when you look at any system, whether it's energy, money systems, agricultural systems, water systems, how we treat water, and you go down the list, healthcare systems, all of these need a huge overhaul. And to develop a consensus around just saying, yes, we need a big overhaul in these systems, and really nothing less than that will suffice, then that gives us the best possible chance for our long-term survival. Regarding short-term survival, I think that we have to be prepared in a very practical level of what's coming. I'm amazed that we're still able to talk on Skype across the world, and in spite of everything that's happening, whether it's the BP oil spill in the Gulf or Fukushima or whatever is befalling humanity at the moment and nature, these incredible travesties that are being committed by people that are still in power, these inevitably will lead to some systems collapse. And the survival will be very, very important in the short term under those circumstances. And these folks that are bringing us these very dirty technologies and very unethical and unjust practices, this predatory greed is so rampant and so obvious now that half solutions won't suffice, incremental solutions. So, for example, in the energy sector, solar power, wind power, well, yeah, that helps, but it's not nearly enough to solve the problem that we have in front of us. It can buy a little time, and we do need to buy some time. And we do need to consider transition scenarios between now and the time that we can actually implement these new systems that are totally clean. And also, of course, is that by individually focusing on our higher selves, our higher consciousness, on the spiritual realms, will enable us to download many of the things we need to understand and do to get through this very tough period that we're now in the midst of, and cannot help but get any worse before it gets better, unless, of course, we do have some divine intervention and the kind of help that we all so desperately need.
That help takes cooperation across divided paths. Certainly in this transition, the current system suppresses, especially the truth. However, we still need to act with a mode of human behavior that reaches out to those that follow this old paradigm with a compassion. After all, when all is said and done, we are inseparable. And to ignore that would reflect the human frailty of denial that an old society holds on to tightly, and one that we must transform. Most importantly, our focus has to surely be on future generations and not to reproduce the greed apparent in personal or corporate arenas heading for the cliff's edge.
Well, that's a very important question, David, because and there are some models for this. And one of my proposals for any kind of new or conscious governance system is to have a truth and reconciliation effort that would be, let's say, moderated by elders, and this would be during the transition period, where the truth does come out, and where there is a reconciliation process so that nobody is unduly or vindictively tortured or militarily invaded or drone attacked or whatever these horrible things that are happening now. And of course, right now in the United States, I have to say, I've left the United States, and it's with great sadness because I've been a very patriotic kind of guy. I was an Eagle Scout. I was an astronaut. I really believed in the basic principles of the U.S. and they've become so miscarried and are now being so badly abused and so unethical, and such a disproportionate emphasis on money and corruption that it's now becoming transparently obvious to us. And that's why whistleblowing and a truth-telling process needs to begin immediately. And it actually has begun. There are some websites, excellent websites. One of them is commondreams.org, which very clearly tells you about all the travesties that are going on. Not all of them, but some of them, particularly in the U.S. And so then some of us are thinking, well, okay, 230 years ago or so, the colonists got together and said, we don't want any more of this tyranny. We don't want to be controlled by the king. And there was a revolution. And a wonderful set of principles were advanced at that time that placed the individual at the top rather than some authority figure or sets of authorities. Now it's been reversed, and it's such a sad thing to see. This country that I loved, still love, at least based on some of the foundational principles. So now I think it's time to revisit some of those principles. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's all great stuff. But there are other wrinkles to that as well, because the tyranny now is more than just the tyranny of a king. It's a collective tyranny of governments all over the world and corporations that have terribly abused their power and need to be revealed for what they are. And that we need to have a passion. We need to kind of model the work of Thomas Paine, but with an overlay, I think this time of, first of all, the environment and the preservation of the environment, the need to restore it, the need to sustain it, because it is rapidly going down the tubes. We don't have much time left to do what we need to do about the environment. We need to stop these ridiculous wars. There are so many things we need to do immediately, but then concomitantly with that, we can still do what Buckminster Fuller is saying is, well, let's design the new paradigm. Let's consciously move toward it. We don't have to say exactly what it's going to look like. It's a co-creative process that involves the presence of spirit as well as the presence of common sense, that, yes, we can revise our systems. Yes, we can open up information about energy sources that have been suppressed by the mainstream media for so long. We can come up with new agricultural systems where you can truly grow food for generations to come without affecting the soil, without draining all the water supply. We can revise our water systems to be truly pure and wonderful. There are so many great ideas there. And so some of us can immediately start rolling up our sleeves and saying, okay, let's design new systems. Let's design new systems that work and make the old systems obsolete. The old systems are not working. The old governance systems, whatever system you're talking about. We need a systemic change that's unprecedented in the history of humanity.
Brian, bear with me. I'm going to take a break. I've been going for 18 hours as usual, Brian. Please do go and have a cup of tea, but don't go too far into that garden. Get to the end of these programs, and sometimes I have to take a break. I have to Ask the divine feminine to come back in and exhale and transmit. Hours and hours and hours of deep dialogue. Train to listen. Train to be the observer. And constantly asking the divine feminine, take away my ego. I work so hard taking away my ego. Exhaling and going back to the still point, the divine energy. I love to listen, but there are times when I get tired and I just want to say something, or I want to shout about this world. How did we get here? And yet there's something inside me today that keeps going. I train myself, I meditate to just listen. And I research and I research and I research. And Brian and I, we talk for hours and hours on end. We drive each other crazy. But I love this man for what he provides and what he's always provided and what he will provide forever. As we never die, we're always here. We talk about 7 billion people on this world, and we talk about these conspiracy theories of one world orders, and there's billions of people on this world. Many sages and many gurus say to us that there are 70 billion people on this world, because in this rhythmic interchange, we never die, and we don't. And Brian O'Leary set off, didn't you, Brian? You set off this amazing whirlwind in my life. A psychological death in 2010, lost everything, put everything into this, and then I woke up. And what a blessing to be in service. I love being in service. That's all there is for our children. This world today is so pillaged, and yet we can't judge those either sides of the fence. I started crossing over the bridge because I wanted to talk to everybody. I exclude nobody, and sometimes there are those who will say, you've just been talking to the head of this company or the head of that company, or you've met the chief executive of Monsanto, or yes, I do, because I reach out. My ego coming in again. But that's crossing over the bridge. A diverse audience. Bring us all together. At the end of the day, we are all inseparable. I look at Brian O'Leary. What an amazing man. What he has brought to this planet. This cycle of events. One day my partner Matilda said to me, you ought to talk to Brian O'Leary. And I remember thinking, who's he? And this man came to the door one day in Los Angeles and said, I think you should. And over the months I fell in love with this man like you cannot believe. He introduced me to so many people and opened my mind. Brought a consciousness to me that is so unbelievable. Brought a completely new energy to my mind. And we had all these programs, and we talked to James Redfield, the author of Celestine Prophecy, Jean Manning, Wade Fraser, Leonardo Wilde. Leonardo Wilde introduced me to Alan Lee Atkins, the pioneer and one of the developers of the CD. And Alan and I, we started to research Walter Russell. Hours and hours and hours of Walter Russell. The rhythmic interchange. The feminine and the masculine. The positive and the negative. The never-ending creativity of this world. The true energy of this world. We have infinite energy as human beings. And we have been in a world for eons of time where That energy has been excluded, manipulated. I started to research. I look back at the incredible societies, the Greek societies, Atlantis, the crystals, the energies. And after a time, it became so evident. Where did it go? Where was the divine feminine attacked? And now the divine feminine is coming back as we're on the end of this elastic band. And here we are today. We are the generation of generations. How more blessed can we be? We're going to return. We're going to find our energy. And we're going to do that through human behavior. And that is my work. I'm not great at it all the time. And sometimes I'll throw things around the room. But I keep working. I never stop. Never ever stop. These old civilizations and their crystals and their energies, the Greek logos, the way that they could talk to each other, they could find anything, they could look at any object and look at each other. And they could discuss in deep detail, in dialogue. No ego, just pure energy. That's what I work on. In my life, for 3 years, I've been working in this for so long. 3 years, 18-hour days. And the more I do it, the more I want to do it. Because I love it. I love the energy that comes out of it. But Brian O'Leary, what a hero. And all of these people that I've been introduced to. And yet they've been so attacked. And Brian, well, he's had some pain, haven't we all? But now, I've learned to transmit it. And talk, and talk, and talk, and get deeper, and get more ethereal into people's hearts. Talking from the ethereal world, not the old language. Talking to people's hearts. Enjoying each other's hearts. Loving the way the chakras work. Looking at the Sanskrit. Looking at the Kundalini. Understanding all of the old traditions. Understanding where we came from and where we are today. I look at where we talk about suppression. We say that we're suppressed by Chevron and BP and the oil companies and Halliburton and governments. That can now change. We're all here today. There are people listening to this from around the world. And for the first time, we can control our destiny through breakthrough energy. And it is here. And there's nothing to stop us. Nothing. And everybody benefits at the end of the day. Brian O'Leary was in, and he's still there in Ecuador. And he saw the tribes being destroyed. He saw the oil companies destroying the nature, destroying the world. Human behavior. We have to support these organizations to transform and change, and they will. Because you are the energy. And when you speak and when you spread your voice around this world, nothing will stop you. Because you have infinite potential.
Well, it's all happening, is it not?
It's happening both from scientific evidence and from evidence from spirit that we are moving very rapidly in a new direction. in some sort of convergence. And it's a very dramatic thing. I'm glad I have a front row seat for all of this. And as long as I'm alive, I'm just going to keep persisting in expressing the vision from a scientific point of view, and hope that my colleagues and know that many others are approaching from a spiritual point of view. And we're going to meet in the middle and move this thing forward. We've got to. We have no choice, and it has to happen very soon.
How are the likes of the Carl Sagans and all those with whom you have taken this journey feeling now, Brian?
Well, I think that if they were still alive, or the ones that are still alive have totally given me up as a lost cause. It's culturally totally different. And I make it okay because now I have new colleagues, new ways of expressing, new ways of creating a sustainable future for all of humankind.
Brian, thank you so very much on behalf of myself and everybody here for having joined us today. It has and always will be a great honor.
Well, thank you, David. It's always a pleasure, and I'm thinking more and more about this because we are talking about the big challenge here. But I think if we keep our eye on the ball, on the goals, what it is that we want, then we will find ways of being able to get from here to there.
We're not here to change the world. We are here to change ourselves. Then the world will change.
All the people who have been affected by this oil system, please don't give up.
The right leverage at the right place at the right time.
We can vote 3 times a day with what sort of world we want, and that's by the type of food that we buy.
We want something that's organic, that flows.
We are made of the soil. All our food comes from the soil.
Those who seek shall see the illusions of our world and will know this time of change. Beyond the veils of mind control, it is certain you will feel the awakening and see. Inside of you are all the answers of the universe, and the truth shall set you free and endless potential. Then we'll be
product of our country is the people.
The finest Americans.
1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, going up in a rocket again.
Anything that we can imagine, we can create. We are creators.
You can't help but be mesmerized by what you see.
I want to still be here to see this wonderful thing unfold.
Brian, thank you so much for everything that you have and continue to give for the people of this grateful planet and abundant universe.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure, as always.